This thought for the month is called spreading the cheer. And so I have this very vivid memory. It was early, would have been almost this time, to be honest, in 2020. So what, we're going back 4 years ago now? No, sorry, early January it was in 2020, nearly 4 years ago. And I was presenting at a conference in Fiji, and one of my colleagues, and who's someone who's been a great mentor to me as well, Professor Gary Egger, he was presenting at the same conference. And he's an epidemiologist, right? They study the cause of the causes and watch, the flow on of sort of, epidemics and the like. Anyway, we caught up because we wanted to make sure that we weren't overlapping because we were presenting at the same conference. And so we had a bit of a catch up and we were just talking about comparing notes as to what we'd be presenting. And then he made this comment and he said, well, that's of course if we end up by going. And I went, what do you mean? Like, it's like 2 weeks away, this conference in Fiji, which is a nice place to visit, by the way. And he said, yeah, he said, well, are you watching what's happening in China? And I went, sort of, I've heard a little bit. He said, yeah, well, the outbreak of the novel coronavirus. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I said, but we're not going to China. And he goes, you know what, just watch this one. And it was really insightful to me because within no time at all, and I know that you guys may have seen this sort of these spread maps, but this is actually showing on a day-by-day blow from around about the 12th of January in 2020, you can actually see how this thing spread. And it was around about within about 6 weeks, it was in over 60 countries. And I just think this is like this phenomenon. And obviously Gary being an epidemiologist who had observed these things. And even at that time, he said that they're anticipating some sort of outbreak, what they call of a Goldilocks virus that's lethal, but not so lethal that it doesn't have time to spread in the process of its replication. And so it changed everything, and as we know, the world is a different place because of it. And, we all have experiences and stories of what actually happened throughout it. This little thing, this tiny microscopic thing that we can't even really observe, at least with a naked eye, that had this incredible capacity to spread. And it had this amazing ability to cause a whole lot of spreadable things. So we actually definitely know that obviously it spread sickness, and we saw the manifestation of that. But it also spread some other really interesting things too, like this proclivity that people develop to acquire copious hoards of toilet paper. Right, so what this actually is a case in point is it's not just infectious diseases, sometimes called communicable diseases because they spread. It's not just infections that spread, it's other things too, like behaviors. These behaviors caught on and people went nuts with this sort of stuff. We certainly know that ideas spread as well. And there is some really fascinating work, and I want to focus in on that word spread, because there's some really fascinating work that was done by two researchers, and here they are. They're both from Harvard. They were actually published about 15 years ago, but there was a series of studies. And this is Nicholas Christakis and James Fowler. And what they did is they said, let's have a look at the spread of things within social networks. And one of the studies they published was on smoking. And what they found is that smoking is socially contagious. And it goes both ways, so that we know that when someone starts to smoke, their social network have a much greater likelihood of starting to smoke as well. And it goes the other way. If someone within a social network ceases smoking, then there is a tendency for the people in their contact, their sphere of influence, to cease smoking as well. In fact, if you have a co-worker who stops smoking and you're a smoker, or a friend that stops smoking and you're a smoker, you have about a 35% increased likelihood that you will stop smoking too. If it's a spouse and you're a smoker, they're a smoker, and they give up, they quit, there's about a 67% chance that you will also cease smoking as well. So they observed this, and you think, oh yeah, that sort of makes sense. Actually, I even know of someone who said that I never wanted to smoke, but I went to a work environment, and that was the thing that people did during their break. Next thing you know, there I was smoking away. So, you can get that, okay, I could understand how a behavior like that might spread. Well, Christakis and Fowler, what they actually also observed is the exact same thing happens for obesity. And and a lot of the health complications that go along with obesity as well. And what's intriguing is that these things are often referred to as non-communicable diseases, right? Non-spreadable, non-contagious. And what they found is that that's actually not the case at all. In fact, what we know is that if you map, and what they have that little map there you can see, is within a large social network, and they had about 5,000 people from the town of Framingham in the US. And what they saw, they tracked to see who are they connected to, and in what ways are they connected, and how does this phenomenon like obesity or weight gain or weight loss, how does that actually spread, if you like, in this social network? And some really interesting observations that will emerge from that. So, for example, one thing you note there, you can see I don't know if you can make sense of those figures, but that mutual friend thing there, that little line, what that represents is that if you have a same-sex mutual friend who gains weight or loses weight, there is a 171% increased likelihood that you will do the same. And they actually have found the exact same thing. So that same sex. What's really interesting, if you look at this study here, the little one there, if you have an opposite sex friend, it doesn't seem to have that effect. In fact, it's not significant, but there was almost a tendency to go the other way, which is interesting. We could talk for ages about what might be going on there. But what they observed is that things like smoking behavior, things like weight gain, weight loss, these things are actually socially contagious, even though, as I said, we'd often sometimes refer to these as non-communicable type behaviors. And so it's not just things that, like smoking, which we probably don't really want, weight gain, maybe we don't really want that sort of stuff. The encouraging thing when we talk about that word spread, is that there are positive things that can spread too. And this is my favorite paper that Christakis and Fowler published. And once again, based on a really large social network. And what they actually were able to watch over a 20-year period is that within this social network, some people got happier and some people got sadder, and they were able to watch the ripple effect of that. How that cheer or lack thereof actually spread throughout that social network. And this is and it was similar once again. It was depending on the type of relationship and connection you had to people. But one of the things that was most profound for me is that what they observed is that within a social network, you can measure the actual spread of things like health, happiness, and hope, even up to 3 degrees of separation. So this means that, if we start with me, and I know that doesn't look like me, but that's my surrogate right there. My direct contacts, my friends, my, interpersonal one-on-one connection that I have access to. Obviously, my emotional state will influence them. But what happens is that by influencing them, then they influence their immediate contacts, even though I might not have any direct contact to them to that second person at all, that second degree. And then that person being influenced, and obviously the influence effect starts to dilute, but nonetheless it's there, that will actually then spread a 3rd degree of separation. So what it means is that how I front up, how I present, what I spread, particularly with regards to happiness or lack thereof, cheer or lack thereof, that actually will go to my friends of my friends. I don't know if I got that right, but you know what I'm saying. What this does is actually highlight the impact that we all have on each other. The fact that this spreading phenomenon, it's not just a thing that infectious diseases do, right? It's a whole host of other things as well. We influence each other in profound ways, and the extent of that spread is really, really quite magnificent, for good or for bad. And so my question to you, really simply today, and this is my thought, is what do you want to spread? What do you want to spread? My father's actually quite unwell at the moment. I've spent quite a bit of time in hospital. And what it's become, just thinking about this spread, of cheer. Like I noticed, I start to observe a thing as you go into the hospital each day. The aptitude of the nurse was actually having quite a big impact on not only my dad, but me. And then I would go home and bring that home to my family, and then that would spread. And I thought, wow, you know what? I can see this. I actually can see how this plays out. I imagine, well, I know as a teacher, as an educator, how I present, how I front up, and how I influence students that might be in my class. I know that they take that home, and then those their parents or guardians or whoever it might be, that will then influence that they'll share that on one next level as well. So this idea of spreading, right? And what do you want to spread, right? You have incredible power to do good or the other. And I think that, there's real value in being intentional about spreading the good. This book, Elizabeth actually mentioned this book, and by the way, this is not a sales pitch for a book at all, but it's a little story, and I want to share it because I think it highlights what I'm trying to talk about here. This is my office that I'm in at the moment. This is going back several months ago now. I was here, it was about 10 minutes before I had to jump onto a Zoom call, and the Zoom call had quite a few people connected throughout New South Wales. It was part of this organisation, and I was part of the meeting. Anyway, I'm sitting there about 10 minutes before, just, doing a couple of little bits and pieces that I had to do, busying myself, when someone came in and said, oh, here's some mail has arrived for you. And they handed me this. Like, this is actual mail. I'd forgotten what it looks like. So here's some snail mail. It's even got stamps on it that have been stamped. And anyway, so it was to Dr. Darren Morton. And anyway, so I opened this thing up, and as I read it, I was just completely heartwarmed by it. And it was the story of a lady. She said, look, my husband and I, we just went traveling through northern Queensland, which is the upper parts of Australia. And she said, and we would travel in our caravan, and we'd stay at all the caravan parks as we did. And she said, on one particular occasion, I went into the laundry to do my washing, so my clothes washing, put my clothes in there, turned the on button, and then thought, what do I do now while I'm waiting? And she said, I glanced over and I happened to see a little book sitting on the bench near the washing machines. And she said, I looked at this thing and I picked it up, and you know what, bless her heart, she says, and I couldn't put it down. She said, and I read this book. And then she said, I actually then found out who published the book, and I bought one and gave a copy to every one of my family members as well. We got this little pocket edition, right? Anyway, great story. I mean, I'm feeling pretty chuffed with this, but this is what she writes at the end. She says, I'm enormously grateful to you for your book. And get this, particularly grateful that I just happened to be in that caravan park laundry at that particular time. And get this, she says, where a very kind soul had left the book for someone such as me to read. And then she actually says, on page 68 of the book, you suggest writing a gratitude letter. Consider this my gratitude letter. Anyway, so cool. I'm sitting there 10 minutes before this meeting starts, reading this, going, oh. Anyway, I get onto the Zoom call for this organisation with members throughout New South Wales, throughout my state. And the chair of the meeting says, you know what, I just feel inclined to say, has anyone got a heartwarming story that they would like to share before we kick off our meeting? Anyway, I'm sort of sitting in the background and not saying much, and no one's saying anything. And he prompts, he says, anyone got any, like heartwarming story they'd like to share? And I'm like, well, okay. I said, look, you know what? This just happened now. Like literally someone just delivered this letter to me, and they just, this is the story. And I thought it was, what an incredible thing that they shared that. Anyway, another gentleman on this exact Zoom call, he said, hey, can I just add a layer to this story? He said, look, I'm not wanting to take credit for this in any way, but he said, what I can tell you is that my family and I went on a 6-month holiday throughout the northern parts of Australia, right up into northern Queensland there, as you're describing. And before we left, we actually bought a box of these. There's 50 in a box, 50 of these pocket edition versions of your book. And we left one in the laundry of every caravan park that we stayed at. And I've just gone, you're kidding me, like seriously. And so anyway, I said, brother, I want to do something. Let me open this. I want to read something to you right now. And the lady's name was Anne. I said, Anne writes, I am incredibly grateful to that very kind soul who left the book for someone like me to read. And I said, consider yourself thanked. Consider yourself, yeah, express great gratitude to you for what you've done. And you know what I realize is that we often have no idea the extent to which our behaviors and the things that we do spread. We don't. We have no idea. And he just got feedback on one of the things that he left, one of the things he did. And there might be many other stories like that. And I'm thinking, you know what, this whole idea, this potential to spread cheer, this potential to spread good, what would that look like for you? What would that look like? What do you want to spread? Because I think we have a whole lot more power to do good in the world than we often realize because of that. So